Well, welcome to the library studio, and here we are in the YAHOWAH blog. I have a question for you. It is now 4:32 here in Paradise in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, and I've been at it this morning since right around 5:30 this morning, so I guess that's 11 hours so far. And during that time, I have been working on translations and commentary on Genesis 2 and 3, Bereshith 2 and 3. And so what do you think? This is the oldest text there is in the Torah. It's one that everybody thinks they know, right? That, heck, there was a garden and there was a couple of people in it, Adam and Eve, they even say, were in it. And, you know, they were naked and soon enough, a serpent, Satan, slithered into the garden, and that dastardly dude, he convinced the woman to take a bite of an apple. And lo and behold, she corrupted her man and, well, got really, really mad, and they were booted out of the garden. Isn't that the story?
That's the story everybody tells. Wraps it up in a nice, pretty package.
Yeah, guess what? It ain't actually that way. One of the most profound insights that I found along the way, and I'm doing this story because I'm following God's refutation of the mother goddess cult that you've heard me talk about here. They've gone dark again, so I really don't give two hoots about them. But God does. It turns out he really has a lot to say about them, and so he took me back to the story in the garden. And you might know I did a full 2 hours on it about a month ago on a family blog, telling you all who would listen that the story of what actually happened in the garden was really very different than the overall perceptions in it, and that YAHOWAH was a much different character than she had been portrayed. Well, guess what? What I found, I did not expect. First of all, as this mother goddess cult has tried to use an AI bot, a chat bot, to disparage the identification of the Choder in Yeshaya 11, which is actually in God's voice, so it's a fairly important characterization. I found something that will blow your mind in terms of, just as the Nakri citation that I keep on referring to in 2nd Chronicles 6 isn't the first mention of the Nakri, and that it's first presented in the 29th chapter of Devarim in the Torah. Well, guess what? The attributes that are afforded to the Choder and the very designation Choder itself is first presented in the 2nd chapter of Bereshith. And it's exactly the same story. What you're going to find as we go through this material, that the Choder, he is the tree of knowledge. And God said so explicitly through Isaiah. And while that's amazing as a confirmation, I mean, it was one of the most riveting and affirming translations and insights I have received up to this point, because, well, Choder is the place where Yada made the transition from being anonymous, was he was very comfortable, to being a named player in God's story. And come to find out, he was identified in Bereshith 1 and 2 before this all began, and identified with the tree of knowledge. And I will prove that to you beyond any question, any doubt, as we move through that material in a future program. But that actually isn't the most important insight in the story. And that's because the fall of man isn't the result of man, nor is it the result of woman. It's God that caused the fall of man. Yes, you heard that correctly. It is God that caused the fall of man. And when you come to understand why God caused the fall of man, you're going to have an entirely different perception. Not only the story of what transpired in that garden, but of the 6,000 years since that time, as well as what you're part of, what you're listening to, what we're doing exactly at this moment. I'm giving this to you now as a teaser. And I don't think that I could overhype the profound nature of what I came into in terms of this discovery today. It'll literally blow your mind as to what transpired there. This is such an exciting time. We are learning at such a prodigious pace. And that's the whole mentality, I think, of God telling us, I want you to move away from your constant editing of these books. I mean, it's nice. I mean, you've done a wonderful job of trying to keep them current and to reflect your current understanding as you have grown in your comprehension of the things of God. And that's really noble. And boy, you got 25,000 pages and growing. It's been a monumental effort, but you do another edit pass to these books, you're not going to accomplish anything that's going to be significantly different than what you've already achieved. They're more than good enough as they are. God wanted us to move into a mode that was so fresh, so current, that comprehension and communication would literally coalesce in the moment. And that is the beauty of this Yahowah blog. The moment I learn something, I can share it with you. And you can benefit from it. Literally, comprehension and communication have coalesced into a stream of consciousness that is powerful, earth-shattering, soul-transforming. And we're all part of it. So we're going to return to our story on Gibowr. Enough said of all of this. Oh, I do have one other teaser for you. I just had the opportunity to see Wookie's promotional introduction to the vlog on the vlog. And so we may hand it out as a teaser before we actually do the next vlog on a vlog. But Leah employed Wookie to do the introduction to the vlog on a vlog. And Rich, wouldn't you say it is absolutely adorable?
Oh, it is. It's hilarious.
It is absolutely hilarious. So we do have a new introduction on the vlog on the.
That's the one thing AI is good at.
Yes, it is.
Manipulating images.
Wookie is making the introduction to you, and he is far more articulate than I would have ever given him credit. Indeed, he's good. So here is Dowd. He is saying, I upright one, have you ever seen anything that is comparable to this? He is talking about not only the upwelling of religious thievery, the very nature of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism that have robbed God of his name and God's beloved son, our Messiah and King, Dowd, of his accolades and reputation, his achievements, because he's the one who fulfilled Chag Matzah, Pesach Matzah and Bakudim. He is our savior. And they don't acknowledge him. They literally robbed him of all of these things to create false messiahs. So and we have, of course, the mother goddess cult, who is now, well, behind the scenes because they've pulled the darkness, the shades down on their site. You have to have the secret password.
And I can still get into it.
To get into their site. So they're obviously doing it to pat themselves on the back and not change the world or people's knowledge or do anything for Yahweh or for his people. But nonetheless, they're doing the same thing. And in their case, they're preempting the Tree of Lives, YadaYahowah, and trying to play Yada. And it's not going over very well. It takes a lot to do that. So God's saying, your choice and my desire is for you to return my soul, bringing my consciousness back to restore on account of their troublesome hardship and ruinous situation, their wasteful and ravaging destruction, with me as the only child and unique son against the young militants, these influential merchants of death and these fierce tycoons. Mizmowr, Psalm 35:17. So, Dowd is just amazed by what he is saying. And as we move closer to his return, he is saying, listen, we're going to have to work yet another miracle with my soul. It's time to come back a third time. We need to return, bring my consciousness back. There's a lot of work to do. And it begins, of course, with Shub. God said in the book of Hosea, and he says it really throughout the Torah, that because his people have rejected him, the only option now is for them to Shub. And so until they Shub, God's not going to Shub. They must return so that God can return and restore them. And Dowd's saying, you need to do that through my soul. He has deployed Dowd's soul already twice. There will be a third time on account of their troublesome hardships, their ruinous situation, their wasteful and ravaging destruction. This is really all of humankind, the entire thing from top to bottom. I mean, the MAGAs are out of control. The Marxists are absolutely nutsoid. The Muslims, well, they are worse than they have ever been, and they've been really, really bad over the last 14 centuries. Christians are as belligerent and as lost as ever, continuing to demonize Jews. It is a horrible situation that we find ourselves. The world is about to be ravaged and destroyed. What a waste. And so those saying, I am the only child. I am that unique son. And yet all of these people, from the militants to the influencers to the merchants of death, the tycoons, they are all hostile to me. Who are the tycoons? They are a fellow that owns X, a fellow that owns Facebook, the fellow that owns and controls Google and YouTube, the one that now owns TikTok. It's the internet now is the purview of tycoons, and they have their own agenda. And the United States has become the merchant of death, and China's not too far behind, nor Russia, building and selling the weapons of mass destruction. Look at what the United States just did, selling atoms and all manner of sophisticated fighters to Saudi Arabia, of all nations, the very nation that perpetrated 9/11. And so he's just looking at this and says, good God, how could you be so stupid? And it's a horrible situation we find ourselves in. So writing these words 1,000 years before, he would return to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, Dowd realized that in spite of what he had achieved, there would be those who would bury him, in spite, again, of the fact that this crime of identity theft would be unparalleled in human history. It is Christianity that says that Dowd was dead and buried. He was excluded from heaven, which is why they felt justified in stealing everything God said about him and giving it to the imaginary Jesus. He knew that his Father's desire and his own was for his nephesh, soul, to return for a second of 3 lives, and that with his consciousness and placed within a disposable bashar body, he could restore the rift, precluding the separation that and breach of the covenant vows that existed and was so pervasive throughout the world, and particularly in Israel, and that he would have to return a third time to finally rectify this great rift. So I cannot claim to be as bold. Unlike Dowd, I did not volunteer for my role. I was not asked to do as he did, which was to write prophetically of the torment that I'm going to endure to fulfill Teruah a century before enduring it, which is what he had to do. But I'm equally confident that Yahweh knows what he's doing and that I can trust him. I, too, will rush headfast and head first into the fray, endure whatever hardship there is, and not recoil, no matter how ruthless the stripes which come with this tough territory. Yahweh has never been popular, nor have any who have spoken for him become popular. You are not going to succeed as an influencer if you speak the truth and for God. Those who do are rebuked, as was he. Now, there is another difference. While I was chosen, I am not the chosen one. While I am a child of the covenant, I am not Yahweh's firstborn. And while my body will be mangled as was his, those who reject what I'm offering won't live long enough to spit out their disdain. My king had to endure being plundered and slandered for 20 centuries. Dowd's foes have been militant, whether seen as Imperial Rome, Roman Catholicism, or especially Muslims. Considering that Christianity and Islam have made merchandise of men in the process of becoming the merchants of death, Dowd knows that those who have fattened their wallets have deprived their souls. And even the most challenging moment, even as we are disparaged for his sake, we're going to remain appreciative. Ours is the most rewarding and enjoyable job on earth. Our Father is uplifting and enabling, empowering and enriching. No matter how much we give, he's simply better at it than we are. And after a while, we realize that even with him doing all of the heavy lifting, Yahweh is so appreciative of our willingness to listen and respond. It is his preference to be prolific in his praise. And yet occasionally we get to do as Dowd is doing here and return the favor and express our gratitude. Keep in mind that Yahweh has chosen a process, a mode of operation, whereby after he was told by his people, the children of Israel, that they never wanted to see him again or hear from him again, he said, I think that's a great choice. I'm happy with that choice. And what that means is that from this point on, God would do everything through men of his choosing. He fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim through his beloved son, Dowd. Everything God does is through men, including when he speaks, including when he calls his people home. This is the way it is. This is the way it will continue even. God is going to administer forevermore through his beloved son, Dowd. And Dowd is going to delegate his will. So Dowd says, I will always be appreciative for you in our tremendous community within the empowered and capable family. I will radiate your light as I confidently express your greatness. Indeed, we are family. We are light with so much good, and we have to ponder why there would be so much bad. But with right known, it's hard to imagine why most are wrong. With love in the offering, why do so many hate what they should appreciate and love what they should hate? He asks, is it wrong for my adversaries to celebrate over me? Those who deceive and mislead loathe and abhor me, shunning me inappropriately and undeservingly, doing so in vain and for nothing, while winking their eyes with the appearance of annoying gladflies and mosquitoes. Mizmowr song, Psalm 35:19. This is not the first time that the carats, these gadflies and mosquitoes, these swarming insects will come into play. We will read about them again as we return to the garden. So no surprise, but I have a thing for mosquitoes. I don't like them. The only mosquito I have met that I can tolerate is a dead one. They are not only the bane of the tropics. I barely survived a bout of malaria while exploring Africa, well, now 50 years ago. But did you know that the only buggers who bite are females? And yet, more than these diseased bloodsuckers on wings, we should all despise Dowd's foes. They have misled far too many, and they have picked the worst possible fight. They are to be abhorred for shunning our Savior. The religious and conspiratorial are only fooling themselves. It is certain that it isn't reconciliation, it isn't salvation or harmonious relations that they speak, but against those who are impulsive rather than composed and thoughtful, easily stirred and readily shaken on earth. They constantly devise and plot. They propose and impute deliberately fraudulent statements and treacherously dishonest messages, tossing out words of feigned betrayal. Their open mouths and greedy boasts against me are, as they say, aha, in a malicious way. Our eyes have seen this, that, or the other thing. Mizmowr song 35:21. Yeah, it's just reprehensible. The things that are said against Dowd. Oh, yeah, he's dead and buried. We know where his grave is. Dowd can't be our savior because the Torah is against human sacrifice, and they can't even think that through. It's truly astonishing how people have devised and plotted against Dowd. And it is the entire essence of Christianity. There is no Christianity without plotting against and depriving Dowd of his title, Son of God, Messiah, chosen one, future and returning King and Savior. Dowd is the one who was crucified on Passover. He's the one whose soul went into Sheol, hell, to deposit our guilt so that we might be perfected in God's eyes. He was the one who was released on the first day of the week. He is the product of identity theft. They have plotted and proposed and imputed all manner of fraudulent statements. And, they have a whole New Testament with Jesus said this and Jesus said that, but Jesus never existed. He was a caricature that was created by Paul in 52 CE and developed over the next decade. In fact, more than a decade, all the way through 66 CE. And then the first two Gospels, which was Paul's term, were written a decade after that in 75 CE by two people who were never eyewitnesses to any of this. In fact, their loyalty was to a man who also wasn't an eyewitness, and that being Paul. It is just a pile of lies. And Judaism is no better. Rabbi Akiva, the father of rabbinic Judaism, created the religion by countering the false Messiah, YAHOWAH of Paul, with a false Messiah of his own, Bar Kokhba, from which Israel gets its six-pointed star. And it's the founder of rabbinic Judaism who not only lied about the false Messiah, but he brought the wrath of Rome on Israel, on Judea, and caused it to be named Palestina, which is what is the haunting name now that looms over Israel and will ultimately cause a Fakistinian state, a Islamic state of terror to be carved out of the heart of Israel, making Israel indefensible, all because of what Rabbi Akiva did long ago. And of course, by causing the diaspora, it is Rabbi Akiva who set Jews up for the pogroms and for the Holocaust. And yet he's the founder of rabbinic Judaism. So Dowd is looking at this and said, it's hard to imagine the deliberate fraud, the treacherous, the dishonesty, the tossing out words of betrayal. And yet that is what we witness. So Paul, Akiva, and Muhammad created Christianity, Judaism, and Islam to aggrandize and enrich themselves, not to save anyone. They made a deal with the devil, and they deposited millions of souls in Sheol, including their own, in the process. It is literally impossible to think oneself into a religious or political or conspiratorial position. Those who are drawn in are typically impulsive and easily persuaded. For example, since it is the most popular, consider the idiocy of Christianity. There are no contemporary eyewitnesses. None. The first to opine the notion of an Iusu was Paul, beginning in 52 CE, and he admitted that he was demon-possessed and controlled by Satan in his second letter to the Corinthians. He never once quoted anything his imagined Iusu said, and he misquoted God on every occasion, no exceptions. His position was, since God failed with the Torah, he authorized me to contradict him and offer a plan of my own, one based entirely on believing me. It's Christianity. But he's not believable. God's not a man. Men cannot kill God. And the proposition of resurrection is both pagan and counterproductive. Counterfeiting is not a path to prosperity. And that's all Christianity is. When we read the New Testament in the order it was written, Paul's 14 letters appear 10 to 20 years, some 4 to 5 decades even, before the Gospels or Acts. And those letters are not only filled with errant citations and contradictory statements, they are an admission of failure. Paul issued repetitive blanket condemnations on those who heard him preach. Those who heard him all rejected him based on the idiocy of his claims. It's just like Muhammad. The Quran constantly states, as does the Christian New Testament, that those who heard Paul and Muhammad universally rejected them, mocked them, even knew that they were speaking for Satan. And if that were not enough to impugn the religious forevermore, it was based upon creating a counterfeit of the actual Messiah and Savior by the process of identity theft, literally plundering the Son of God of his acclaim and his achievements. Then, for worse measure, Paul and pals robbed Jews of the promises Yahweh made to Israel, all without a stitch of evidence supporting replacement foolology, and all facts to the contrary. That put us in a position where the lyrics of these psalms, scribed 3 millennia ago, are in direct refutation of Pauline Christianity, to say it's utter nonsense. And it is. Should you not think so, I would encourage you to do what none have done before. Not a single person has made their way through even one full volume, much less all 5 of Christianity, and remained a Christian. The evidence against the New Testament, against Paul, against Iusu Christu is overwhelming. So Dowd is correct. Religion, politics, and conspiracy are deliberate frauds. They're treacherous schemes to deceive and an overt betrayal of trust. The instigators of the Abrahamic religions were greedy bastards with a malicious bent, not unlike this psychopath fleecing the mother goddess conspiracy cult of diabolical personality, all in league with Hasatan. Literally, it is Satan that has pushed their buttons to get them to do as they're doing, just as he did with Chava long ago. So without adding anything of merit, they simply denounce what they once valued. Flapping their lips, they reveal nothing other than their lack of chakma, intelligence. And that's inexcusable, since in both occasions when they claim to have identified the voice of their Ruach M, their spirit mom, there was no Ruach and no M. Just a failure to recognize that chakma is a feminine noun. And if that were not sufficiently moronic, their second mistake was to change Yahweh's name to make our Father transgender. They claimed that the Yod was masculine and the Wah was feminine, representing daddy and mommy. But one small little bitty problem, well, two actually. They are the opposite of their gerrymandering. The Yod is feminine and the Wah is masculine. Dowd takes solace that Yahweh is aware of their malignancy and their malice. The son's relationship with his father is unassailable, and you will note Yahweh remains throughout, no matter where you look, throughout the Torah, throughout the prophets. He is always masculine, singular. Turns out he's really not a fan of transgender. You have witnessed this, Yahweh, Dowd says, my upright one and foundation. You are not silent or inactive. Using an engraving tool, you inscribed this message and you plow right through this crafty and devilish plot. All the while, you never distance yourself from me. Psalm 35:22. God, as I have said, remains masculine singular. Father and son continue to be of like mind, and neither is passive or tolerant. He says, I am pleased that you have chosen to be aroused, that you have decided to remain alert, aware of the blind and the unjust, because we have decided, we're of like mind, to take action regarding this summer harvest. You and I want to extend the lives of the living on behalf of my decision to resolve this dispute, my God and my foundation, with regard to these contentious taunts and hostile disputes accusing me. Mizmowr Psalm 35:23. Simply stated, to oppose Dowd, to not rally around Dowd, to not make Dowd the center of your message, and that he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, so he is the tree of lives. There is no way to the Father except through the Son, and the Son is our former and returning King, the actual Messiah and Son of God. He is Dowd. If that isn't foremost in your mind, then you do not know Yahweh. You are not part of the covenant. You are not of value. And if you are not of value and you are therefore perceived as being opposed to Dowd, that is to tangle with God. To rob the son of his titles and achievements is to engender his father's wrath. And as for the summer harvest, well, this is Shabuah. And it is on Shabuah that, well, these mother goddesses, for example, they claimed that the harvest of standing grain was their harvest. And, well, they're going to be seen as the worthless chaff that is blown by the Ruach spirit, the very spirit they revered as their mother. And then they're going to be dispatched to Sheol by Yahweh's chosen Malach, spiritual messenger. Turns out God had a lot to say about fractured families. Covenant was broken with him long ago. And he wanted to make sure that the last two witness to the covenant would understand exactly what it feels like to be part of a fractured family. And he wanted to make certain that we would understand all of the references he had already chiseled in stone, that he had etched into his word, that he had made indelible, so that we would learn and grow as a result of knowing God's position on cheating on the covenant, on a fractured family. So we must never lose sight of the fact that contentious taunts to bury Dowd, to justify stealing his identity, to manufacture a Christ or a mother God, are entirely dismissed prior to the 5 volumes of Twistianity and YadaYahowah collection. We have gone after this over and over again. Without Yahweh's collaboration with Yada, this entire Mizmowr remains incomprehensible because no one understands what we presented throughout Twistianity, that Christianity is a product of identity theft, that Dowd was the victim, and that Jesus never existed. And so it is essential to know that when trying to analyze the message in this song and appreciate the vitriol God has at those who have worked against him, including the rabbis that trained Paul for this position and the rabbis that fought one false Messiah with another. In the case of Akiba with Bar Kokhba. It is only throughout the YadaYahowah series that the greatest crime in human history was solved and that the greatest discovery ever made is presented and proven for you. Since it is now readily apparent that Dowd has passed judgment on all of those who have opposed him and those who have come against his herald, his admonition would have brought an end to the deadly and destructive nature of religion and conspiracy if there was even a modicum of intelligence to be found among them. As I would say, as I publish, and I'll send it out for final edits tomorrow, and we'll see if Mariah, who's the one who's going to be transforming it into a postable document, is able to do so. It's long now. It's about 65 pages in length. If confronted with absolute proof that God despises them and that they're wrong about everything, it'll be interesting to see if there's even a modicum of functioning brain cells in the group, and if they will just continue to dig in and wallow in their own vomit, or if they will attempt to come clean. What's your bet there, Rich?
They've already quadrupled down, so I won't be surprised if they do something stupid.
Yeah.
And I will see it because I see it all, because not everybody in your group is loyal to you.
Yeah. So the bottom line is that God says that they're going to continue. And well, I find them as nothing but an irritant and an amusement. God sees them as far worse. And he is using this fracture of the covenant family to help explain while he is so utterly frustrated with his people over time. When we kind of getting back to the teaser I had at the beginning of this program, when you come to appreciate why God caused the fall of man, and while there has been 6,000 years for man to develop some grit, some character, some intelligence, some knowledge along the way, so that man finally becomes interesting to God again. Even if there were only 6 people, that's more than 0 in the garden, because neither of those 2 were of any interest to God. Even if there were only 6, 66 would be 10 times 6. 666 would be like the ultimate win for God. 6,666. Oh my goodness. What a marvelous result. And I don't know over that 6,000 years how many there will be, but I can tell you that if there were only 6 or 66 or 666 or 6,666, it is from year 6,000 to 7,000 that we will have the opportunity, as the tree of lives overshadows the garden and the tree of knowledge sits in the center of the garden to bear its fruit. We will have the opportunity for 6 to become 7, 66 to become 70, 666 to become 700, 6,666 to become 7,000, and perhaps 70,000. Although I don't want to push it too far, because it is really obvious that God's not interested in quantity, but instead quality. And I think that had it been a different result in the garden, God would have been happy with Adam. It just wasn't. It wasn't satisfying. And God had no issue whatsoever rolling the dice and saying, given time, I think things are going to turn out better. I think we're going to restore that tree of knowledge. And I think it's going to point to the way of the tree of lives. And I got a couple of guys. And over all this time, I think they're going to work together. And it's all going to work out. And indeed, he's right. Well, now that it is readily apparent that Dowd has passed judgment on all those who have opposed, he and his herald, he says, you have decided to judge and adjudicate through me, consistent with your integrity and your sense of what's right. Yahweh, my God, negating their celebration regarding me. Mizmowr, Psalm 35:24. You have decided to judge and adjudicate through me. Your will is to execute justice, both defending me and condemning with me, consistent with your integrity and sense of what is right. Yahweh, my God, negating their celebration. You can look at this in a number of ways. There are those who want to take one statement out of Yahshua and say, God alone saves. And so that we don't need any stinking Dowd to do salvation. God alone saves. We don't need any Choder or Bashar or Nakar or even Adamar Parah to save. God alone saves. No, he doesn't. God alone doesn't do squat. Excuse me. I know him pretty well. And I know his sarcastic nature. And so when I say he doesn't do squat alone, comment on very high authority that that's correct. God said it. I'm happy that the children of Israel said to me to go away and shut up. They never wanted to see me again. And I made it real clear, I'm not returning to them until they return to me. How in the hell is that going to happen if God doesn't deploy someone to make that happen? How in the world does God fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim without Dowd doing what he promised he would do? How is there a sacrifice of the Adam of Parah without one? Why is Yahweh returning with Dowd, who is Elyon in his presence? All things pursuant to the very hand and influence of God. If he is doing everything alone, why did he have prophets? What is the purpose of any of them? Ever think it through? Why would God do everything alone and then in his own voice introduce the Choder through Yahshua? The presentation of the Choder is not in Yahshua's voice, it's in Yahweh's voice. Why would he do that? Why would he speak of the Nakar that's going to arrive in the last days through Moshe and Devarim if there wasn't to be one? Why did he tell us in the 18th chapter of Devarim that he would send someone extraordinary, someone that was like Moshe, a prophet, and that you have to listen to him because he's going to hold you accountable based upon what he said and did if he's not working with Dowd? Why would he have the marvelous statement in Yahshua 9 that a child was born, a son has been given, and all of these marvelous things are going to happen through him? Who is the Lamb upon whom the iniquity of us all has been laid in Isaiah 53? You ever think it through? Are you going to pick one thing and pretend that it stands apart from everything else without even pondering the implications of everything else? When I came to the realization that Dowd had volunteered to serve as the Passover lamb and fulfill matzah, taking our guilt into Sheol, and that he had decided it was in his interest to do so, and in God's interest to do so, and his people's interest to do so, by studying the Mizmowr, the Psalms 1 through 30. Now we're at 35. The first thing you have to do when you recognize that Dowd had volunteered to do this is to process it through everything. Isn't that what it says in the 22nd Mizmowr? Isn't it what it says in the 88th Psalm? Isn't that the message that is conveyed through Yeshayah, Isaiah? Do you find it consistent all the way through? Do you find where Dowd would have figured out that this was his calling? And that he realized by looking at the Exodus that if he didn't do this, his job of being king forevermore was going to be impossible. But if he did do it, it would all fall into place. He'd be respected for the first time. You have to view it all together. There's a remarkable word that I'm going to share with you in a future program. It's how etz becomes etzah. Etz means tree. Etzah is the feminine of tree, just like para is the feminine of par. But it adds such richness to it that you find the spiritual celebration of etz as etzah as one of the 7 spirits of Yahweh. And it leads to the spirit of Dayath. And so what you have is the tree of knowledge in the presentation of the choder, which is why the choder, of course, is a stem. They grow on trees, in case you haven't noticed. And he's a netzeri, one who branches out as an observant branch. And if you were also curious, trees are also shoresh. They're rooted, which is what is said of the choder. Right? What you have to do if you're going to try to understand and explain something pursuant to God is to put it all together, to see how the whole picture, when properly framed and looked and observed from the proper perspective, how it tells a unified and consistent story. And those who will pluck something out of context and say, well, I'm going to go with this theory, are always misguided. That is what you must do. So here, Dowd is saying that God has decided to judge and adjudicate through him. But there's other places where God says that the rod of divine justice, in fact, in these very Psalms, is afforded the goy whose God is Yahweh. That choder, one of the meanings is rod of divine justice. That's how he's introduced actually in Yeshayah 10 that walks us to the presentation in Yeshayah 11. How can both be true? Just as God alone saves, but he chooses to save through people of his choosing. People that are now known as Dowd and Yada in this particular case. Same thing is true with Dowd. God, as his son, as his chosen one, as the anointed Messiah, authorized and put Dowd in a position that he gets to decide and judge, to adjudicate. But Dowd delegates too. What's good for the Father is good for the Son. And guess who he's delegating it to? The very person he has defended throughout this Mizmowr. And that's the same fellow that has been consistent, showing integrity, revealing what is right about Yahweh, my God, negating their celebration, even as it is ongoing, and finally returning Dowd to his rightful place. By contrast, the door to hell will be held open for many. Dowd's dignity and Yahweh's integrity demand no less for us, no less from us. It is what we're going to do, and then we will shut it. You are either among the 1 in a million who are right about everything the Messiah and Savior, the Son of God and King, represents, or your party will end as ours begins. Yahweh will annihilate the religious, the political, the conspiratorial, the militant, while transforming the earth back to the conditions experienced in Eden, this time with a more interesting, better educated cast of characters that has some experience and grit and backbone. And so we will be mature celebrants of all that God has to offer. We will appreciate life for having overwhelmed death. We will know the difference between right and wrong. We will have experiences that make us interesting. We will have shown that we can be relied upon when it comes to working with Yah. Never let them say in their hearts or their minds, "Aha, our person." Do not let them say, "We have befuddled and caused confusion regarding him, devouring and swallowing him." 35:25. Yeah, this is a very insightful statement that you really have to be on the top of your game, I think, to have a full appreciation of. You see, in Christianity, rather than Dowd, dead, buried, out of heaven, aha, it's our person, YahowahTruth. In Islam, no, it couldn't be YahowahTruth. No, it couldn't be Dowd. No, it couldn't be Adam. It couldn't be Moshe. It couldn't be any of those people. It couldn't be Abraham. No, aha, our person, Muhammad. What, with Rabbinic Judaism? Rabbi Akiva, aha, it's our person, me, myself, and I. And if you don't like me, myself, and I, try this Bar Kokhba fella. See how that works out for us. There you go. Look at the mother goddess cults. Oh, no, it's not Yada, it's our queen. She's the right one. She knows about the voice of Mother God. Befuddled, confused. They have sought to devour and swallow him. Devour and swallow whom? They want to devour and swallow Yada, the parah, the fruit of the tree of knowledge. They want to literally devour him, claiming him as their own. It is the very story, by the way, that is told in the garden. You may not know it because it's just not presented that way. But the fact is, based on the introduction and the conclusion to the story of what transpired in Eden, the central figure of that story isn't God. It isn't Satan. It isn't Adam, and it isn't Yahweh. It's the tree. The story in the garden is all about how one tree leads to the other. All about the tree. And they want to preempt it, to control it. Because if you can control the tree of the knowledge of right and wrong, you can censure life. You can end life on the planet. You can preclude the fulfillment of the next 4 Mow'ed Mikre. you can play God and have control over life and death. Dowd's nefesh soul, of course, is the most valuable treasure in the whole of the universe. The religious, they're not entitled to it. And while it is obvious that the most befuddled religions have created mass delirium by devouring Dowd's words to regurgitate the mythical messiahs of Jesus, Bar Kokhba, and Muhammad, the cost of this crime isn't measured in one soul that they sought to swallow, but in the billions they vomited away, and most importantly, Dowd, even as the Savior, even as the Son of God, even as the Messiah, the former and returning King, is unknown without the tree of knowledge. It is the only way we know about Dowd. It's the only means to capitalize upon the tree of lives. He says they have chosen to be shamed for having been consistently wrong, because together they are confused and dishonorable, shamefully digging a hole for themselves. Yes, they block access to their translations and their insights, while celebrating the wrong and the grievous harm done to me. Let them be clothed in humiliation and shame, fully aware of their guilt, ignominy, and scorn, who are praised, growing in influence and opposition to me. Ooh, Mizmowr, Psalm 35:26. Dowd is not a fan of influencers. He and Charlie Kirk would not have gotten along at all. They have chosen to be shamed for having been consistently wrong. They must be disapproved. They must be humiliated. You see, God's not into tolerance. I know we get a lot of people say, why do you make such a big deal about things like other religions and cults like the mother goddesses? Why do you even care about them? Because God cares. Because Dowd cares. Because they had a lot to say about it. And unless I report what they had to say about it and explain it, then it will be for naught. It would be as if they never shared any of this. If they hadn't written prophetically about it, they did so. They did so for a reason. My job is not to say, why did you write about this? My job is to share what they had to say about it. My job is to explain why the Messiah hates Christianity, why he hates Judaism, why he hates Islam, why God agrees with him and disparages and disdains and has no tolerance whatsoever for Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. And how today, because of our timing and because God simply does not want to use anyone that doesn't have empathy for his situation, and he has endured 6,000 years of a breach in the family. He has experienced nothing but fractured family for 6,000 years. And he wants the person who speaks for him to have experienced that same thing, to have endured it and to have thrived and recovered and prevailed through it all. Because he wants to show that it can be done. He wants to show that we can have the character to rise above it. He wants these things known so that we have an appreciation for what went wrong, what is going wrong. And it's only until you know what's wrong. It's the tree of good and bad, of right and wrong. And it isn't until you know what's wrong that you are in a position to appreciate what's right. Adam and Chawah had to die for us to appreciate the value of life. They had to fall for us to appreciate what it means to stand. These things are essential. God spends as much time condemning that which is wrong as he does commending that which is right. And so the same is true throughout the YadaYahowah series. That's why we began here, excoriating Islam, and then went here, repudiating Christianity, and then went here, introducing God, Yahweh, and have our final book, at least until the publication of Coming Home Volume 4, being a thorough analysis of these next 8 years, so you know exactly who is going to do what, when, and where, so that you're prepared. This is where we are. And God wants you to know that he is not tolerant, that he doesn't want to play nice with the idiots. That if you work against him, his son's herald, or anybody that is part of his cast of characters, or you repudiate any aspect of his message, you're in serious trouble, and more so now than ever before, because it's all on the line. 8 years is all we have for Mow'ed Mikre to fulfill. It's now or never. And you know, when Yahweh went back all in, he went back in with, as he said, a lone goy, whose God is Yahweh, to Asher show the way to the benefits of the relationship. His Nakar, his Nakri, his observant foreigner, empowering the Choder, who is the final Zeroah. This Obed-Edom on behalf of Dowd, who will be the man from Edom who saves many according to God. This is where we are. He's all in right now. You can either capitalize, ignore it all, and 8 years you will be for naught. Or you can do what so many have done and oppose it. And then you will plead for death. He says, let them. This is now the Messiah. This is the returning king. This is how little sympathy he has for those who have caused such hardship, who have spoken against him and his herald. Let them be clothed in humiliation and shame. Let them be fully aware of their guilt, because he's not carrying it away. Ignominy, scorn is the lot of the influencers who have opposed Dowd. Every Christian, every Muslim, everyone lured into the promotion of any form of Judaism, even Marxists and MAGAs, all of them. Well, 26 verses in, and Dowd remains unrelenting. There will be no excuses tendered or considered, no reprieve. There's no pardon. There are no second chances now. The crimes being committed are deliberate and they're unconscionable. Now, I'm openly criticized by those who think that my responses to many who have been openly disparaging of me or who have sought to publicly denounce YadaYahowah are impolite, that they're undignified and unjustifiable. My reply is always the same. I never pick the fight. Never. But I don't run from them either. Just as Paul, Akiba, and Muhammad committed this crime against the Son of God, and now Father and Son are responding to them, I think it is wise to follow the example set by Yahweh and Dowd. They chose to disparage our king and his herald. And therefore, our King and his God are here to restore his credibility and dignity. They were wrong, and they bear the blame. What they have done was dishonorable and shameful. And by having wrongfully robbed the Messiah, they have dug a hole for themselves, essentially digging their own grave. And there will be no resurrection, no pearly gates, no virgins waiting for them on the other side. With the option of being clothed in light available to those who accept our Savior's gift by fulfilling Pesach and Matzah, our souls enveloped in radiant energy, leading to us being Bokorim. The others, well, they have chosen to wear their guilt. And that's telling, because it is what Dowd's soul removed from the covenant family, taking it to the place the identity thieves are ultimately headed. They will see it there. Their destiny is etched in stone. It is nevertheless curious that the religious and conspiratorial continue to praise those who have led them astray, venerating them as if the worst among us were saints and goddesses, victims. I witness this inversion of reality every day among those who have made it their calling in life to spew vitriol at me, most of them a man they have never met, on behalf of a psychopath who is using them to salve her raging insecurities and her glaring ineptitude. I am therefore with Dowd on this one. I agree with him. This comes highly recommended. He says, of their own volition, let them shout for joy and be glad, those who desire and willingly accept the realization that I'm right, that I'm honest and vindicating, and who continually say, great and growing, empowering and enriching is Yahweh, who desires and delights and takes great pleasure and satisfaction in the companionship and contentment, and especially the reconciliation and salvation that is achieved through his co-worker. Psalm 35:27. For those who are now professing that God doesn't need to work with anyone, that he alone saves, what does it say here in this Mizmowr? That Yahweh takes great pleasure and satisfaction in the companionship and the contentment of, especially the reconciliation and salvation achieved through Ebed-Hu, his co-worker. Why does Yahweh constantly refer to Dowd as his Ebed, co-worker, if they didn't work together to achieve our salvation? What do you think he was talking about? This is perfectly stated. We should read it again and again, and we will. Of their own volition, let them shout for joy and be glad, those who desire and willingly accept the realization that I, Dowd, am right, honest, and vindicating, and who continually say great and growing, empowering and enriching is Yahweh, who desires and delights in taking great pleasure and satisfaction in the companionship and contentment of, especially the reconciliation and salvation achieved through Shalom, his Ebed-Hu, his co-worker. Perfectly stated. It's worth remembering, don't you think? Yes, indeed. Our great lion has grown into his roar. He says, then my tongue will consider and decide, then speak out and roar your vindication for having been correct, and each and every day proclaiming your laudable excellence and renown, noting your radiance and manifestation of great power for having done something extraordinary and praiseworthy. 35:28. Yeah. I think my king is not only addressing his herald, but most importantly, his father. Yes, there would be one man who, after 25 centuries of lies, would learn and share the truth, thereby reestablishing the dignity of God's beloved Son. And it is true that Dowd and his herald will have both served Yahweh at this time for the benefit of his people. And should you think it also speaks of you, well, I'm delighted. For both. For you, for Dowd, for Yahweh. Because it means that you have done something exceedingly worthwhile and that you've earned the respect of the greatest man who has ever lived. If that also speaks of you, my hat's off. Congratulations. I respect you as well. So I thank you for listening. We will, in our next program, begin with a summation of this marvelous song. And then we're going to move on to one of the most delicious presentations ever recorded by God regarding his Son. Thank you for listening. And